Hi, I'm Michelle and I do samples and make patterns for Lemon Lane. You might have seen some of my bags and pouches and purses on the shows on Create and Craft, and I'm going to show you now how to make them. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the Kate coin purse. You get the patterns already printed for you, just need to cut them out. So you get the actual pattern piece itself and a choice of 2 zippers. I'm going for the number 5 because that's my preference. So also I've used the Kingsley and Merriweather cushion panels to make this because I just love them. So I've used part of one of the panels for the front, and then I've used one of the plain panels for the back and for the lining. So it's perfect. And then also, once you get your patterns, you can download your actual instructions. So I've got instructions as well on how to make it. And then on top of that, you're going to have this video as well. So everything walks you through. So now we're ready to make our purse, and it's really easy, very beginner friendly. So now we've got the back. I've already added the foam to the back. To the front, like on all the pieces, I put my woven interfacing on and then also my foam, and I'm going to attach them together. I've put a label on because I love them. We do sell labels if you want to stitch on a nice handmade label, and also maybe some washing instructions if you're giving them out as a present, or if you want to sell them so people know to take care of their purchase. So I'm just going to do a longer stitch length and stitch all the way around the front of my purse, attaching my foam, and any excess foam I can just trim off. This is a bit like trying to practice your top stitching really, isn't it? It's good practice. So just round we go. Last one. If you miss a bit like I have, don't worry, as long as it's more or less in position it doesn't really matter. And find my scissors and chop off any threads, because they tend to get everywhere otherwise. In seams you don't want them to be in, and just best to chop them off as you go. Now I'm going to take off my extra foam. So it's a perfect size. And this last bit. So once you've done that, and you've already got your back ready, we're now going to do our zipper. And I've already put one of the zipper tabs on, so it's encased my zipper, and I'm going to show you how to put the other one on. So once I've cut these out, you press them in half, press them into the centre and press over, and that gives you your tab. And I've actually added woven interfacing on mine. You don't need to, but I just think it gives it that bit of extra strength. So I'm going to show you how I like to attach my zipper tabs. So the first crease line that we've done with our iron, I'm going to stitch it onto my zip. Take down my stitch length. Do a bit of a back stitch because we do need it to stay in place and not move. So that's that bit. And then we're going to fold it over, and as you can see from the back it looks a bit of a mess. You've got raw zippers and raw ends, and we don't want to see any of that. So when you fold it over, it's got rid of all that. It looks really neat and professional, and that's what we're looking for. Up our stitch maybe to 3.5, whatever you like. Then only put your press foot to the end of the zipper tab rather than getting your needle right over, because you need to catch both the front and the back, and this gives you every chance of catching it. Take the ends off again. Have we caught the back? Yes, we have. So now we're just going to make it level with the zip. Yeah. That's nice and neat and tidy. Now on the front, there's some markings on your pattern. I've already marked mine of where to place your zip and your zipper tabs. So if you line your zipper up with those markings, you know that you've got it in the right place. Then we're going to put the rest of the clips on. I'm going to just pull that over a weeny bit because I don't want a loose zip. Now we're going to just baste the zip onto the purse. So I'm going to do a bigger stitch, but I am going to back stitch because I don't want it to move. And stitch along. You can do your lining and your front all at the same time if you wish. I just prefer it this way. I just think I've got more chance of getting the finish that I'm looking for. I can see what I'm doing and I know nothing's going to move on there. It's just an extra couple of steps, but I think they're well worth it for me. So now we've got our zip in place. We want to add on our first lining. And we're going to pin this in place. It doesn't matter whether you stitch from the front or the back, really, for this, because you've got no previous sewing lines to follow, whichever you're most comfortable with, I think. I brought food with me. Thank you. So now we're just going to put our stitch back to its original stitch length. Do a bit of a back stitch so it doesn't move, and then ignore our needle and look at somewhere on your foot that gives you the right seam allowance. This will keep you straight rather than trying to follow your needle and you end up all over the place. I'm just going to stop now, turn my back purse round a little bit. I want to get that zipper out of the way. I'm going to go back, carry on to the end. And that's one lining and the front also, but we need to do the top stitching next. So we've got the lining, I want the zip facing towards that lining, I want all my seams facing towards the front piece of the purse. I'm going to up my stitch and then do my top stitching, and I'm following a marking on my foot so that I can get the perfect top stitch and it'll be as straight as I possibly can get it. Not going too fast. I think you don't want to go fast with top stitching anyway. It's not something you want to race with because it's very visible. Going to get the zip out of the way, the foot back down and sew on to the end. And that's that first bit done. Nice and straight top stitching, very happy with that. And I'm ready to put my back panel on, which is right in front of me. So I'm just going to flip that over and clip them together. And we need to baste this in place. We have the right stitch length because we've just top stitched, so we've got a nice long stitch length. back stitch, sew along. Get our zipper out of the way. There we are. All done. My little pedal keeps sliding away from me. So now we're ready to top stitch this one. No, we're not. Ignore me. Can we go back? Yeah? So now we're ready to add our lining. And the way to do this is to make sure that you have lining to lining, right sides together, and clip in place. And then when you check the front, you've got front and back facing each other, lining to lining, you know you're good to go. So just going to get the right stitch length, which is regular stitch length. So now we're just going to stitch along. Make sure all your pieces join together and level. Follow somewhere on your foot to make sure you're keeping your seam allowance straight. We're going to have to move that zip foot in a moment. Let's move it now. So we're just going to lift the presser foot, slide the zip along, turn your work back and then carry on. Otherwise you'll get your stitching will just go a little bit wonky and it will be noticeable. Put my stitch length back up because I'm going to do another top stitch. So this time I've got 3 layers to the back, to one side should I say, and the back to the other side with all the seam allowances all facing towards this back piece, and we're going to top stitch the back. Put that down, just pull out of the way. Want to do a little back stitch so it don't come undone. Once again, ignore your needle and look at somewhere on your presser foot that guides you for your top stitch. It's up to you really how close you want to go and to your work. There we are. So now, happy with that and that. At home you need to get your iron out and it's time to give your purse a press. Or just finger press. That's lovely, all ready. So now take your front and your back together, line your edges up together and pin, clip. And then we're going to do the other side, but we're going to take our pen and just give a little reminder, big enough so I can get my hand in and turn it. I just need to remind myself, because it doesn't matter how many times I make them, I'll always forget. And then we're going to pin these sides, just so they don't move, and then on the lining. But the important bit, very much so, is getting these lined up here where the lining meets the front and back. So you want to put the tabs towards the lining, push, and make sure that these 2 edges are as lined up as perfect as you possibly can. There we go. And then same on the other side. Push your tabs towards the lining, but then get these edges pushed together This one's a bit more stubborn, but there we are, we've got it. Push together. So now we're going to sew one half of the front, then the other half, and then we're going to sew down the lining, and we're going to, once we've sewn down the lining, we're going to make sure that we take a bigger seam allowance, but I'll show you what I mean by that and how to do it. So let's start first of all with the front of the purse. So here we are. Change my stitch length to the regular stitch length. A little bit of a back stitch. There we go. And we're making our way up to those tabs. So now it doesn't hurt to double check your work, make sure nothing's moved. Make sure you've got them exactly where you want them to go. That's it. So let's have a look. And they're in the perfect position. Happy with that. So we'll move on to the next side. Get rid of these strands. And carry on where we left off. Because we're not leaving an opening here, don't forget this is the front and the back. We're just basically taking our time. Checking our work as we go. Because in the end it's far quicker than getting your unpicker out. So now just checking that they're together. And they are, or they seamed it, but we'll find out in a second. Yes, happy, very happy actually. So now we're ready to do our lining. So if you're new to sewing and this is the first time you've ever made anything, just follow the instructions, do a 1/4 inch seam, I think, and stop where you've done these gaps. If you've sewn before, I want to show you how to do a much tighter lining. So I'm going to put my seam allowance to 3/4 inch. I know it sounds like a lot, but it does work on this. So 3/4 inch and just up to this line. And then instead of cutting my thread, you could just slide it along if you wanted and meet it back up to the other mark I've made. Do a bit of a back stitch. There we go. Take off this extra. Saves a bit of cutting thread, doesn't it? And then we're going to do, down the side seams, we're going to do our 3/4 inch seam allowance again, starting at the bottom. But then we must always end up back at your 1/4 inch. So as soon as you've gone as far as you think you can, you're going to pivot onto like a diagonal on your lining, and you're going to sew across until you can get back to your 1/4 inch where you started. And that will make everything sit so nice inside your purse. And not only if you're giving this away do you have to give them the purse, but you've also to put some money in as well. Some sort of superstition. Then I'm going to pivot a little bit. And on a diagonal, we're going across now to try and meet up where we started. So now we've got to trim up our purse before we do anything else. So I want to cut little diagonals just on the bottom seams, but leave all that because along the bottom, because I need that for turning. So just chopping a little bit off. Chop a little bit off this side. And then we're going to go up the seams. Don't go too near your stitches. Ignore these sides at the minute. We'll deal with them once we've got around everywhere else because it's just a little bit different there. Then we're going to take definitely the extra off on these foam because it will sit much better. There we go. Maybe clip the corners, but just make sure you don't go into those stitches. I'm going to leave them there a minute. I'm not happy about cutting that. So then we're going to take it as far as we dare without going near the stitches over these where the zipper tabs are. You're not cutting the zipper tabs because we didn't sew over them, but that area there, so much bulk, and you don't want that going through your poor little machine. So you see all that extra that we've cut off, and it will make a big difference. So just going to push that to one side, and we're ready to turn through. And even though I forgot to leave my zipper open, it slid open perfectly, which was very lucky. But normally you leave your zipper open. It's something you need to always remember, Michele. And then you push it through. Not too difficult. I'm going to go in those corners in a moment. It's a lovely little project, is this. Make great gifts. And great for your craft stalls if you're selling. Or doing a bazaar or whatever you want to do. Or just making a load for yourself. Because you can never have too many purses, in my opinion. Just pushing them corners out. And then we want to push out where them tabs are. And you get such a lovely edge. Love how they push out. So professional. And here as well. But you wouldn't be able, if you had to chop that excess off that I was telling you about, that I showed you, you would not push these out the same. You just wouldn't do it. So it does make a difference. And then at home you get it all pressed and push your lining in. So we're all ready to go really to sew this lining up, and then we'll push it into the purse. I am going to have to push these corners out a little bit this time because otherwise I can't find the line where I need to do my sewing. I could maybe not have left as big a gap. I think we'll be fine. So at this point, if you're a good hand sewer, you could do like an invisible stitch, especially if you're giving it away as a gift. Or if you want to sew it on your machine, I'd suggest using a matching thread. On this, I don't think the white's too bad because it's such a light colour anyway. And I'm just going to make sure I'm at the right, yeah, I've got the right stitch size. You don't want to go, you want to go near the edge, but not too near the edge because you want to make sure you catch both the front and the back. But if you're watching it as you're going across as well and pulling your lining taut as you're sewing it, it kind of pulls it into a nice line for you. So now, cut off my excess thread, push the lining into the purse. And it still pushes, even though I had to push them out a little bit in the corners, because I should have not left as big a gap, it's still not that bad to push back in. That one, and there you can see, if I'd have ironed this, how neat it looks, and that's your finished coin purse.